So I just want to say a few words about the situation in Stockholm today. Um, Obviously, it's been somewhat overshadowed by the situation in Syria. Um, but I think the other thing is that this is now becoming pretty frequent, um, and so it's hardly surprising anymore. So the latest from Sweden is that 4 people have died and at least 15 have been injured. Apparently, a 39-year-old Uzbek man with sympathies to Islamic State has been arrested in a suburb of Stockholm. Now, the Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven made a statement. He thanked the international community for their messages of sympathy, and he said that the attack won't destroy our values. And he listed democracy, human rights, and I think tolerance was the other one. Um, there are a number of responses online that are a little bit callous, basically saying the Swedes brought this on themselves. I don't endorse those comments. I think that is inappropriate and callous. However, I did see an interview on the BBC, and it was an interview with the editor of a liberal newspaper. Now, this guy was clearly uncomfortable even mentioning the word jihad, and he said that there has been far-right attacks in Sweden as well, terrorist attacks. So I was trying to think what he was referring to. Certainly, Norway has experienced far right terrorism in the form of Anders Breivik, um, and I've no doubt that Sweden has neo-Nazi factions. Of course, it does. But in terms of actual terrorist attacks, I looked up Wikipedia, and there are 3 documented terrorist attacks in Sweden, or terrorist incidents in Sweden. 2010, a failed suicide bombing on the very same street that was attacked today. In that situation, the only death was the perpetrator. 2 people were injured. Again, early in this decade, there was a failed terrorism plot, again Islamist. And there was today's attack. So that's 3 terrorist incidents, all Islamist. My impression of Sweden is a country that is absolutely deeply entrenched in the mindset of multiculturalism. And that is that I get the impression the liberal establishment in Sweden are very, very happy, are very willing to talk about the far right, neo-nationalist groups, but they are visibly uncomfortable even discussing pan-Islamism. Now, to be clear here, I am not a fan of I'm no neo-Nazi, um, and I don't downplay the sort of problems that those groups cause. I don't think they're the answer. I also have no issue with the humanitarian approach to refugees, but when you have a situation where tolerance is being exemplified through a situation where you cannot even talk about problems like Islamism without the left wing establishment seeing you as some sort of bigot, that to me is a very serious situation. And I think it's wrong to say that Swedes brought this on themselves, but I do think Sweden is a country in denial because it's still being guided by this kind of rosy vision of a nice multicultural society. And I don't want to say that because it sounds like I'm disrespecting a country that's just faced a terrorist attack. But this is a reality that is affecting, well, it's being seen all over the world. It's been seen all over Europe in recent years. From Nice to Berlin to Dusseldorf to Antwerp to London and now Stockholm. And there's been other examples. And I'm just naming those cities that have been impacted by a rampage style attack involving a vehicle. That isn't even including the other Islamist attacks. Now, the argument that there is also a threat from the far right is true. There was the Anders Breivik atrocity. There was shooting of Joe Cox last year in Britain. There was murder of the elderly Muslim man in Birmingham. 4 years ago. And you can find many examples of racial hate crimes against refugees. For example, against a young lad in Croydon not long ago. So no way am I saying that there isn't a threat from neo-nationals as well. But what I take issue with in terms of the liberal establishment and the left wing, the alt left mindset on this is a complete and utter stubborn refusal to acknowledge that there is a serious problem with pan-Islamism and to acknowledge the possibility that they are infiltrating refugees. Now, I've said before, I think that neo-nationalist groups are wrong to say it's just refugees because some of the worst Islamists are homegrown. You know, they are British and French nationals and Swedish nationals and Danish nationals. But the problem with pan-Islamism isn't just from terrorist attacks. There was a Swedish academic, Lars Vilks, who made films about Islam. He has had many death threats. His house was attacked in the arson incident. Now, I cannot understand the mindset of someone who thinks that the populist right is a bigger threat than pan-Islamism. And I have no doubt that Swedish liberals are going to say, oh, this was a terrorist attack, we can't blame Islam, we can't. And they're going to be very frankly politically correct about it. But the sad fact is this is going to happen. And unfortunately, this will probably not be the last such occasion. Now, by no means am I saying Sweden should take a Trump-like approach to this. Every country is different. And it's up to the Swedes to decide what approach they take. But in my opinion, the Swedish obsession with multiculturalism and Swedish neo-tolerance, which includes tolerating intolerance, is utterly counterproductive. I mean, Prime Minister Löfven spoke about human rights. Islamist ideology is the polar opposite of human rights. It's the polar opposite of liberal values. And yet, my impression is the Swedish establishment simply won't talk about these things. Why? I understand that it's just happened and they're trying to establish the facts. But according to the reports, the guy that was arrested was an Uzbek national who has sympathies to ISIS. Now, is anyone really going to be surprised by this? I'll let people make their own judgment. And like I say, Sweden's a sovereign state. It's up to the Swedes what approach they take. But I do believe that the Swedish establishment is in denial. And you can see this in other countries. I would argue in Canada, especially under the Trudeau administration, and in some other countries that have an obsession in believing that multiculturalism trumps everything. In my view, that is incredibly naive because you cannot make any sort of equilibrium between a culture that believes, for example, women who are raped are adulteresses and should be stoned to death from liberal democratic societies. And this mindset of making an equilibrium, oh, we can't say anything about that because we need to respect their cultural values because it's part of diversity. You're shooting yourself in the foot. To be clear here, I am not saying for a second that Sweden should pull up the drawbridge, not accept refugees, and pander to the alt-right. Not for a second. But I'm saying I think there needs to be more honesty about the fact that you cannot have unchecked immigration. You cannot have unquestioned multiculturalism. It's a height of naivety.